Welcome to the Long Thread podcast about spinning, stitching, and weaving by hand. The podcast is presented by Long Thread Media, publishers of Spin-Off, Handwoven, PieceWork, and Little Looms magazines. Find us online at longthreadmedia.com. Trinway Silks is where weavers, spinners, knitters, and stitchers find the silk they love. Select from the largest variety of silk spinning fibers, silk yarn, and silk threads and ribbons at trinwaysilks.com. You'll discover a rainbow of colors thoughtfully hand-dyed in Colorado. Love natural? Trinway's array of wild silks provide choices beyond white. If you love silk, you'll love Trinway Silks, where superior quality and customer service are guaranteed.
Hi, I'm Gabi Van Tassel from Bluebonnet Crafters, and I'm the inventor of turtle pin looms. Pin looms are small handheld looms that quickly weave self-contained fabric pieces like squares, hexagons, and more. Weave with almost any yarn you have on hand, then combine the fabric pieces into projects of any size. These looms make wonderful companions for any fiber lover, at home or on the go. I'd love for you to visit us at turtleloom.com to explore the full loom catalog, patterns, and more. Hope to see you there.
I'm your host, Long Thread Media co-founder, Ann Marrow. Karen Elting Brock is the editor of PieceWork. She's also a writer and a world traveler. PieceWork was founded in 1993. Well, Karen, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So you are the editor of PieceWork, which I think is probably our hardest publication to describe. PieceWork just had its 30th anniversary a couple years ago. Can you tell me a little bit about PieceWork and how you see PieceWork?
Well, I think PieceWork is one of the more difficult magazines to describe because it covers such an array of topics and over such a broad period of time. So we have ancient textiles, we have more contemporary examples of needlework, articles about all of those, and we also have a variety of techniques. So you will read about sprang, you will read about crochet and knit and a whole variety of needlework and cut work and white work, everything. PieceWork caters to a variety of interests. And I think that's why people often wonder exactly what it's about. A few people have described it to me as National Geographic with needlework.
Yeah.
And I like that description because it is global.
Even the word needlework is pretty broad. It's not just a needle pulling thread. It can be a knitting needle. It can be actually things that don't involve needles at all.
Right. And I feel like historically, PieceWork has at times focused more on needlework. In much earlier issues, there was a lot of natural dyeing and basketry and beadwork. And that's actually something that I would like to direct in PieceWork in the future, is including needlework, but also all this by hand, all that handwork.
Yeah. You talk about all the different kinds of articles that PieceWork has, and it's not just a how-to magazine. You know, I think a lot of our publications have a really strong focus on technique and skill, and PieceWork has some of that, but it's kind of broader than that.
It's much broader than that. And in fact, we have more articles about people and history and techniques than we do actual how-to projects in each issue. And the articles are a range of not only themes, but types of articles. So one of my favorite themes, I guess we can say, are family stories. And I love when authors share something specific about a textile that they might have or have had in their family for generations. And there's always a kind of sweetness about those stories that I really like. But people enjoy them so much because many of us have those. You know, so many people have a doily or a shawl or a dresser scarf that was from an ancestor. I think you do too.
I certainly do. I have so many, so many.
Many of us do. And so we identify with that. And when people can share a moving story about an item that they have, and then maybe give a little example of what they have done with it, or kind of create a pattern for something based on an item that they have. I think those are always rich stories. But we also have a lot of historical focused articles about a technique from a specific period of time, or a kind of needlework from a specific region, or handwork from a specific region. So there's a real variety of articles as well as a variety of needlework topics.
And it really is kind of everywhere from very home focused, very individual, all the way through. There are certainly academics who have written for PieceWork and had a much more kind of a focused on a rigor as well as individual stories. And PieceWork isn't explicitly women focused, but focusing on textiles really is sort of de facto a women's stories kind of a lens.
Yes, that's true. We have included stories both by men and about men in the past, but they are few. Mm-hmm. And it's nice to include stories, for example, of men in the highlands of Peru who have been knitting for hundreds of years, and the amazing knitting work that they do. So I like to include that too, and we have over the past included some of that, but it is primarily women's work. And I think that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's great. Especially because so much of the work of women is not seen, and also so much of textiles is ephemeral. This is something that looks at stories that are not necessarily valued, but also not necessarily even preserved.
Or known. Mm-hmm. And, something that I'm seeing more and more of is not just looking at the textiles in a collection or in a specific person's collection, but wanting to know the story of that. And we had a wonderful article in our spring 2026 issue about a New England lace group who spent a lot of time researching the specific stories of the makers of Ipswich bobbin lace. And so, yes, we know about the lace. We have these examples, and we have the historical context largely from male-written historical documents and letters. But they did a lot of research in discovering who these women were and what their stories were. And I'm seeing more and more of that. And I really like that because it's a way to bridge the personal story with the historic context.
Yeah. Speaking of collections, the most recent issue of PieceWork, as we're speaking, was a museum issue, which I think you were really excited to work on. And I know that all of us have been really excited to see. And just, what do you think is so... When I was a kid, museums seemed so dry and dusty, and now they just seem so cool. What do you think about museums is so interesting to us?
Well, on a personal level, I've always loved museums because I'm just fascinated by the variety of items that you can discover and what you can learn in a museum. But specifically for PieceWork, I think about how much of our stories, our photography, our inspiration come from museums, how much we value them and rely on them, and in fact partner with them to create the issues of the magazine. Any issue, not just this museum issue. So I kind of wanted to pay tribute to that, and to also have the opportunity to peek into some lesser known museums. Most of us are familiar with the V&A and, larger textile museums or collections around the world. But there are some amazing small collections and stories that come from uncovering these little connections in smaller corners of the world. But also going back to kind of telling women's stories, textile collections in particular are a way to tell the story of women's history in ways that otherwise might be overlooked, as well as other stories looking at material culture and what we can know about a particular point in time based on the cloth and the costumes and the fashion, which I think is another really fun aspect of textile collections.
And now a word from our sponsors.
This episode is sponsored by the Mountain and Valley Fiber Arts Festival, coming to Durango, Colorado, the first full weekend in October. Formerly the Towsville Festival, this new chapter brings together natural fiber artists, vendors, instructors, growers, and makers for a weekend of shopping, learning, and community. Plan your fiber arts weekend at mavafiberartsfest.org. That's MAVWA, fiberartsfest.org.
And now back to the show. I remember more than a decade ago, Franklin Habit did a piece in PieceWork about the Smock Museum, which at first I thought was a museum of covers that you put over your regular outfit. But no, it is a museum. I believe that Smock was a place, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's kind of like a coal town, if I recall correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes.
Yeah.
One of my favorite pieces, well, I shouldn't say this because I love all of them, but one piece in this issue, we asked curators of a few different museums to share what their favorite pieces were. And it's such a fun piece because we visit museums that we may not know about otherwise, and who have amazing and surprising collections. So that's been a treat with this issue as well.
And speaking of museums, one of the projects on our website that you worked hard on and are really excited about is our new museum directory.
Yes, I'm so happy. I was so annoying to everybody on on our web team wanting to get this up. But I think it's a great service to everyone to have this directory of international museums with textile and needlework collections. So you can go to the needlework directory on our website and search for museums in Italy or museums in Colorado or museums that have lace collections or costume collections. So there are large and small. And what I've loved is, since we published this on the website a few months ago, I've heard from dozens of people who have said, because we've asked for it, we asked for people to let us know if we should add something. So I've added dozens and have dozens more to add. But I've heard from so many people who say, oh, I was traveling in Malaysia and you should know about this museum. And I was traveling here and you should know about this museum. And then we hear from some museums themselves saying that they want to be added to the list. So I think it's just a great resource for everybody.
As we're speaking, I just realized, hey, I know of 2 museums in Romania that I should see if you have in there.
I don't think I have Romania.
Oh, I have at least 2 in Romania and 1 in Hungary.
That's great. I might have Hungary. I might have Hungary. But yeah, please send them to me. And it's also fun to communicate with the readers who, because I receive all of these emails. And so I like to communicate with the readers about their experience and to let them know that I've added the museum to the list. So that's fun too. I like that opportunity.
So for the most part, this is a generalization, but for the most part, museums tend to preserve more historic elements. But one of the things that you are also passionate about including in PieceWork is contemporary stories and textile traditions that are still ongoing around the world.
Yes. Well, and even in the museum issue, we have a few articles about a specific museum, and the author, designer, has looked at a piece, a historic piece within the museum, and then created a contemporary project inspired by that. And so I think it's both the challenge and the joy of PieceWork is bridging past with present. So here are these lovely old vintage items that we see great value in, but how can we make them something that we would use and enjoy in the present? And we can. And, and I hope that we do that in every issue. We take something and make it more contemporary, make it something that our readers would like to try themselves.
And that is interesting because there is the process versus product. Are the projects in PieceWork, are you intending for them all to be kind of used in contemporary life? Or is it just sometimes that a contemporary maker could practice the technique and it's a sort of a contemporary but historical facsimile, say?
Yes. I mean, I think both. Definitely, we try to present some projects that are more contemporary, that contemporary makers will want to try. But sometimes we present a technique and it's just a how-to. It's just, this is how people did this. And there may not even be a companion project. It's more of an instructional, this is how it was done. And then do with it what you will, find it interesting, or, hey, maybe I can make something myself with this technique.
It really kind of does boggle the mind how many different ways people have imagined to twist string back on itself.
Yes. And it's so wonderful. I have the whole collection of Weldon's practical needlework, and it's so fun to just sift through all of those books and see exactly that. I mean, all of the things that the Victorians came up with to knit and crinkle paper and and macrame and, crochet and stitch and Mount Melick embroidery. It's just phenomenal, the volume of handwork.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned being interested in the men who knit in the highlands of Peru. And that's a way that you have experienced textiles yourself. You have done some incredible textile travels. And I think of that as being kind of an engine that you bring to the PieceWork textile catalog.
Well, thanks. I like being thought of as an engine. I have traveled a lot. I've been very fortunate to have lived and worked and traveled in areas that are rich in textiles. And that's one of my absolute favorite activities, is to be in a place and discover traditional ways of life. And that almost always involves some kind of textiles. So I was the associate publisher of Thrum's books for many years. And so I was able to travel to Peru a couple of times, but also Morocco and China and Guatemala, all incredible countries with textile traditions. And so I was able to see and meet artisans, men and women, who continue to work in these, in many cases, ancient traditions of spinning and weaving and needlework. So it seems wherever I go, I find it.
Well, and that is, one of the things about textiles. So wherever you go, Keith Recker said quite a while ago in this podcast that the only time that you're not wearing a textile is when you're fresh out of the bath. So
yes, absolutely.
yeah. So when you are seeing people doing these traditional methods that they're keeping alive, there's still evolution. I've heard you say sometimes, well, they used to do it this way, but now they do it this way. And so it is kind of a continuing tradition.
Absolutely. And I think for contemporary artisans, it's one of the most difficult challenges, how to maintain that tradition and carry it forward. And, do we continue to use natural dyes, even though it's much more time intensive and we have to charge substantially more for the garment if we do so? And also making innovations to the traditional design, and how much of that is warranted, how much feels like the past is being honored, but, we're carrying forward a sustainable livelihood for ourselves. And so that's, it's a balance. And sadly, in many places around the world, traditions are being lost. And that's one of the goals of the Thrum's books, was to try to preserve those traditions, because in certain areas, for example, in Guizhou, China, when the current practitioners of specific techniques pass away, so passes the tradition, because younger people are interested in a more urban lifestyle and aren't interested in preserving those traditions or carrying on those traditions. So that's a challenge too, and that's something that I'm also particularly interested in, but concerned about.
And I think that that's partly one of the fascinating things about PieceWork is it's less intense than say a whole book on a particular technique in China, but there are all of these stories that draw it together. So, and then there's the way that there are traditions that are passing away, and yet we have people who want to know those stories.
Yes. And that's why it's so important to capture them and to tell them, because we do want to know those stories. Those are some of the most fascinating stories that we can learn, because it's from, on one hand, often a culture that's very different from our own, and yet, the work of our hands is what we share, and so we can completely identify with that work, even though culturally it's so different from what we are familiar with. But it's very important to tell those stories and combine that with more mainstream, should I say, and contemporary work in the magazine. So sometimes it's a challenge to fit all of that together.
Yeah. It's just so interesting to think about. There's the idea of the past as a place. And so we have people who are separated from us by time and separated from us by distance and lifestyle. And those two things together are far away and something that we have to look for.
I love the idea about the past being a place. I mean, I think that's a big part of what PieceWork is. We're going into the past.
Yeah. And imagining the lives of those people and what they have in common with us and what they have separate from us. So people, for most of human history, textiles were so precious that you would do anything to preserve them. And now that's like a value that you have to try to hold on to. And so connecting that with people and thinking, oh, that's very different from the way we live now.
Yes. But thinking about some of these indigenous communities that I've traveled in, they're kind of still in that place where the cloth is very much still a part of their life. And it's not necessarily something to be preserved, but something that is integral to their daily life.
So not preserved in the sense of we have to keep this alive, but preserved in the sense of I need to use this again tomorrow.
Right. I need to carry my rice down the hill in this bag that I have, just woven.
Right. Emily Whitted talks about how through time people have mended, and it was just sort of an expectation that keeping your cloth new, that even rich people would do this.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that.
So the museum theme was one that we were all particularly excited about, but every issue of PieceWork has a theme. When you think about those themes, how do you come up with them? And then how do you match them with articles and projects?
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
I guess I have the luxury of thinking about themes that both interest me and that I think will interest our readers. And so we've already talked about museums, but in the summer issue, we had everything related to blue and white textiles, which was fun because it was a way to focus, but also with a lot of latitude, because there's so much in the world of blue and white. So that was a fun issue to put together. And for each issue, we put a call out to our community asking for submissions for articles and projects. And I'm almost always so excited and surprised at the range of proposals that we receive, things that I never would have thought about. So, for example, we received a submission for an article about the history of medical uniforms in blue and white. And I thought, wow, that's something that I would have really thought about. But it's an article that we published on our website. And it's fascinating to think about all of the social relationships with the colors of white and blue related to healthcare. So it's things like that that often surprise me and that I'm excited to know about. We have another issue for winter, which is the quilt issue. And it just seemed time that PieceWork did a quilt issue again. We've dabbled with quilts here and there, but that was something that I thought about because quilts are just so wildly popular right now, and there's such an interest in them. And historically, there's so much content, so many stories from around the world. And so I'm really excited about that issue. We're putting that issue together right now. And again, there's a really nice blend of some history, some personal stories, and then some how-to. So I think I'm excited about it. I think it'll be really fun and beautiful. We have some beautiful projects. So each issue I kind of think about as I'm putting it together. It's like writing. You don't really know what you're going to say until you start to write. And I have an idea for an issue, and then the proposals come in, and then I start to think about it. And then I get ideas. Then I see how each of the pieces can possibly fit together. And sometimes there's a missing piece. I'm finding that with the issue that I'm assigning right now, which is our summer issue for next year, because we're always a year in advance. So there are a couple of pieces that I feel are missing, and so I'm filling those gaps with items that I'm finding myself and reaching out to people. So it's never the same. I guess every time I put an issue together, it's a slightly different process. Sometimes it's super easy, like with the quilting issue, and other times it's a little more difficult because it takes me longer to see how everything can fit together.
And so the process is similar in a way, but the quilting issue is the only one I can think of in recent memory where there's a single object that's the theme. And there are certainly actions that go along with it. But museums is the idea of collecting in a place. And then there's a material aspect, like what materials are bringing things together. And there are so many different ways of kind of getting a slice of this cake, this layer cake.
Yes. But frankly, that's my favorite part.
Yeah.
Because it's a very creative it's both problem solving and creative all in one. And it is really fun to just take all of these parts and see how everything will fit together, and to have an idea, kind of an overarching, an arc, I guess.
Yeah.
Through all of the pieces. So it's fun.
So how did you get to be so involved with textiles? Is this something that you grew up with, or is it something that you came to as an interest of your own?
Both, I think. I grew up in a household of making. My mother dabbles in everything. I mean, she truly does, from, making corn husk dolls and hollyhock dolls to weaving wheat and embroidering and knitting and crocheting. She did leather work. So there was always making in my house growing up. And so I learned to do a lot of those things very young. Knitting is the thing that stuck the most and is what I do the most now. But then I guess somewhere along the way, I became interested in cloth. And a friend of mine reminded me a while ago that when we were in high school, I said, I want to learn to weave. Now, I don't remember this. I don't remember this at all, but she does. That's the value of having longtime friendships, I guess. So I'm not sure exactly really how it started, but I've always valued fabric. Not so much clothes early on, but fabric. I've always been fascinated in fabric and hand-woven fabric and handmade things. And then as I've traveled, as we've talked about, you just always find it, and it's fascinating. It's one of the most fascinating aspects of my travels, are discovering new fibers and new ways to make things, not just textiles, but other things as well. So I wish I had a better answer for you, but it's just kind of, it's just kind of always been there, that fascination.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the place where you were most recently before you came back to the US and, accepted this role at PieceWork, you found people working with a very unusual textile, which was nettle.
Yeah, it was great. So I was in Nepal. I was a Peace Corps response volunteer in Nepal for a year. And one of my fellow volunteers discovered in her community that they made these bags with nettle. And the bags were woven in my community, but they were using a cotton, or maybe even a cotton blend. But in her community, and she invited me to go experience this. And so we documented everything and made some video and wrote an article about the whole process. And it was amazing how this community has this ritual of going into the forest and collecting nettle, and then spending the next several weeks processing the nettle and, boiling it and pounding it and spinning it and then weaving it into these bags that they use as everyday bags to carry everything from firewood to children to just their daily items. Everybody, they strap them on their backs, and they're so practical and clever. But the amount of work, the human hours that are involved in that process is just mind-boggling. And I'm just so admiring of it.
And the other aspect that you bring to PieceWork is that you also have a background as a writer, or have to combine your interests in textiles and writing together in the magazine.
Absolutely. It's a wonderful combination. And I just wish that I had more time to actually write some articles, because I've done that in the past and I love writing. I do have a background in writing, and it's fun for me. So PieceWork really is kind of a great combination, because it speaks to or it calls on my writing abilities and editing abilities, as well as my love for textiles. So it's a great combination.
You just spoke about having written in the past, and you've been the editor of PieceWork now for a bit over a year, but you actually have a pretty long history with the magazine.
I do. I started on the editorial team, I don't know, maybe in 2010, 11, something like that. And so I started working on putting together some issues as far back as that until about 2015, I think. And then I moved on for a time.
Mm-hmm. And you also helped Kate Larson when she was the editor of PieceWork a bit. So you've kind of gotten to see and work with a couple different iterations of the magazine before you got to make it your own.
Yes. I guess that's a good point. I've never really left it because even though I wasn't officially on the editorial team, I did do a lot of freelance work. I helped Kate, which was a lot of fun. And then I, wrote a handful of articles as a freelancer. So that, that's fun as well. So yeah, I guess I've been connected in one way or another for 20 years.
Yeah. Wow.
More.
Well, yeah. Well, 2011 was only 15 years ago.
Oh, right. 15 years. 15 years.
Yeah. It feels like more.
I'm good with words, not with numbers.
And one of the things that you probably have been working on for all that time, which is the perpetual PieceWork challenge. Part of the reason museums are so important to PieceWork is that we want to see the stuff, and finding pictures of the stuff is so challenging.
Yes, but it's gotten a lot easier. I remember years ago when I was first working on the magazine, it was incredibly difficult and expensive, so expensive to get the high quality images needed for publication. And it took a tremendous amount of time and, sometimes begging. We're a small magazine. We don't have a very big photography budget. And sometimes I prevailed and sometimes I didn't. But now it's so much easier because so many museums, and I'm finding more and more all the time, have online collections that are, they provide high-res images for public domain, open source images. And so we're free to use those in any way we would like. And there are just fabulous, fabulous images available now. So it's become easier. But it's still a consideration. And that's one thing that I have to keep in mind when accepting an article is photography. How easy will it be to have companion photography for this particular article? So, because that's important, because we have to tell the story in part through pictures. So that's important.
I remember there was an effort to have an article about this particular kind of, I think it was a First Peoples in Canada, a Northern First Peoples, string art technique, which it's a verb. It's like people make string art. It's not, I make this thing and I put it down and it stays there. They're constantly interacting with the string. And it was in development for years because there weren't photos of anyone doing the stuff, making the string figures. And I think we were looking for a sculpture and there was one sculptor and I'm not sure he had a phone and just this, there are so many stories that if you can't show it, you're really kind of hampered in telling it.
Absolutely. One of my favorite photo acquisition stories is years ago, we had a story about Latvian gloves and specifically gloves that were with a particular traditional costume. And of course, we had to have a photo of that costume. And, we struggled and struggled. And I finally found something. And so I contacted the Latvian photographer, using Google Translate because I have no Latvian, he had no English. And then, and back and forth, we got the photo, he sent it, we got the permissions, we paid him. But it turned out that, I learned a little bit of his story, and he was, kind of living in a van and traveling around the country taking these photos.
Wow.
So it's kind of fun, to learn a whole other story in the process of getting these photos. But for some reason, that one really sticks in my mind because I had to work so hard to get that image. And then, got a fun story to go along with it too. So,
yeah. Wow. That's funny because it's not just the stories of the textiles, it's also the stories of the people who hold the textiles.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Karen, I know I don't want to keep you too long because I know that you are busy working on your quilting issue and working on assigning the future issue, but it's just been such a pleasure to talk to you.
It's been wonderful to talk with you too, Anne. Thank you.
Thanks to our sponsors for supporting the podcast. Thank you for listening to the Long Thread Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please rate the show and leave us a comment on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. Thanks again.